How's it going, YouTube? We're back with a live stream. And today I got a guest, Veronica, here. And you guys have probably seen her already on some of my videos mentioning her because she's initially raised suspicion for Mike Postle cheating, informing Joey Ingram, as the memes are saying, and basically getting him on the track of basically going after the poker cheating. And yeah, welcome to the live stream, Veronica. Could you just give people a brief rundown of what you're doing apart from poker and yeah, just in your own words?
Yeah, so I was the first duo, me and Jake and I, doing commentary at Stones when the show first started, and I have been associated with them since. I've been doing commentary. Also had my own Veronica and Friends game, which I hosted, and occasionally did commentary on. Yeah, besides that, I've been just I'm a recreational poker player, grinding. Mid stakes, lower stakes games. And as we talked about, Omaha 8, which is one of my favorite games that I'm terrible at, trying to get better. And I work full time in tech. And yeah, and I didn't, I had to come out with Mike Postle. I, I guess I didn't accuse him. I guess I put out a tweet that I was trying to be as objective as possible without being burned at the stake. And at the same time I put out that tweet, I didn't think I'd be taken seriously if I just came out with a full-blown accusation. I wanted to um, put it in a way that was edible for a general audience and have people look at it and be objective for themselves. So.
I thought that was really fair, that initial tweet, and basically just showed that you were suspicious of it. And with the kind of hands that we've seen of Mike Postle, like, I mean, to make that tweet, like, I just couldn't think of it as like in any unfair sense, because yeah, we've seen the hands. I mean,
I think hindsight, it's really easy to say, oh, it was so obvious. But we're looking at the hands, we're looking at 18 months worth of hands in a microscope in a small period of time. I think there was no one in that room, except for maybe JFK, Justin Kuraitis. There was no one in that room that was looking at every single hand of Mike's and able to put together a graph of his wins and losses. And, a lot of things didn't make sense, but we needed the poker community, kind of like the 2+2 analytics team. We needed the poker community to put something together, and we did that. And now it's obvious to us. But yeah, I don't think it was that obvious to anyone at the time. There was something going on. There were whispers of something going on, but no one had enough time in their day to watch the live stream. Was hard to watch if you weren't in the game or your friends weren't in the game.
Absolutely. What I meant by that is more not that it was automatically clear, but that, for you to make those tweets, just like 3 hands would have been enough to at least justify making that tweet, in my opinion. Like, if you see somebody 4-bet clicking $5,000
I think it was
ace high with aces with like a gutter ball. I think it's fair to at least make a tweet and inform some people and say, okay, I mean, not just that hand alone, but like, let's say 3 to 5 hands. It's like, why is he able to do that? Because, yeah, let's be clear here, during the streams that hasn't been done. And yeah, maybe we'll get back a little bit later here and on why we think that it hasn't been done before. I think there has been quite a dynamic, which I found particularly interesting on a human level, and how these dynamics evolved over time, over like 2 years. But we're going to get to that a little bit in more detail. So when you go back, I think it started all out, you mentioned that on another podcast, maybe Joey Ingram's, like in 2015 at the beginning or end of 2014, when you were one of the 2 commentators starting out with Stones Live. How did you get approached to take on this commentator role right away? I mean, how did
I think I was the proactive one. I used to do radio. I used to host pageants when I was younger. I won a pageant too. And I went up. I was friends with Roger Bailey at the time, who started the podcast, or who started the live stream. And I said, hey, if you do this, you're going to need some commentators, and you're going to need some not boring commentators. I said, let me find a pro and put me in the booth with the pro, and we'll have a fun show. It'll be entertainment plus some technical analysis. And he said, okay. I convinced Jake to do it with me, Jake Rosensteel. It took a lot of convincing, but he finally agreed. And we were the only commentators for, I think, like the first year. And then, because it was running twice a week back then, and then they went to 3 times a week. I eventually moved away. Jake plays professionally. His hourly was too low, doing commentary because they didn't pay great. So that's how I got involved. I kind of put my foot in the door.
Awesome. So also you said like payment was a little bit on the lower end. Was like that was probably not the what really fascinated you about the whole live stream. Could you go more into the reasoning why you did that? Because you mentioned to me also you were working also full time, and you did this more like additionally as well. Like basically this like a side hustle thing. What was your motivation to do all of this? As of course poker, but like maybe some other reasoning as well.
Yeah, I mean, it was just a lot of fun. We had our own, it put us on the map. There was Live at the Bike, and then there was Stones. We were the little brother to Live at the Bike. And I always thought, oh my gosh, it'll be so great if one day we get Zoom cameras like Live at the Bike. And maybe Justin will start to realize the importance of having technical commentary and bring in some pros, which he did once in a while. It was, we knew the people in the game, so it was fun to watch them play. I think it was a great learning tool for the local pros because they could watch themselves and learn, what their leaks were. I think we also created a cast of characters. Even before Mike Postle was on there, we were, so excited when Harlan was in the game because Harlan was an action player. David O, wild man in the game. Everybody had this character behind them, and it was just a fun show. I think we were not initially, or I think Justin's goal was not to become another Live at the Bike, but in my mind, that's what I was hoping for. But I think we settled on a fun with light technical analysis show, which I think I think what it turned into, unfortunately, was just a trap to bring players in to fleece them in the last year.
Now in hindsight, but you're basically describing also your vision. Did you ever like you brought that up to Justin and the others? Did like these conversations about the visions on where this project is going? What was like the response? Like, was there one, or was there like or just something like pushing?
Yeah, this is interesting because I remember when Justin first took it over, Roger left and Stones officially took the live stream from him, and Justin took it over. And the IT director of Stones was involved and had basically control of the tech portion of it, which was where the peak room is. Justin eventually got him out completely, and he oversaw the entire thing. He wanted complete control. I think that I'm just trying to think like when it transitioned from a show that was, fun and entertainment to when they decided that it was going to be this narcissist dream of fleecing the locals. I think.
I mean, it must have at least had some form of preparation, at least like a month or so before July 18th, 2018.
So back to your last question you asked about, I used to talk to Justin about it. And I used to say, I think you need to bring in some technical commentary. I would love for you to bring in a pro. I think you should pay the pro what a good hourly would be to be in the booth. I don't think that, this color commentator that doesn't have much to add in a technical analysis should be paid as much as the pro. And I think the audience will appreciate that. And I remember we started gaining momentum, and we would have like Run It Up come to Stones, and we had Jonathan Little come to Stones, and we would gain momentum, and then he would just drop it off and he wouldn't continue. And I feel like we lost a lot of our audience because there was almost a complete lack of poker aspect to it. And even me as a recreational player, I still like to hear an analysis that breaks down the potential thought process of the player in the hand. So that's another, I don't know, it's easy to look back now and think that everything was contributing to the cheating, but it's hard not to. It's hard not to think that it was just a scam, just to bring us in and take our money. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I think that the whole commentary thing, I think we can also go to it a little bit later and what makes good commentary. But what I'm then interested in is, when did Mike Postle come on scene the first time? I think he was there in 2015, wasn't he already? At least so off stream.
Yeah, Mike was a regular in the room from all I can remember. I can't remember exactly when he started playing in my game, but it was, I think, at least 2 years he was in my game every single game. And he was a lot of fun. He was a really nice guy. He was very generous, always brought lots of wine. Mike, Frank, Alicia, and I were really good friends in the game, and the four of us were always in there. And then everyone else was, would be more people like traffic coming in and out. But yeah, the four of us were just like the main staple of the game. We always sat in the same seats. Now I know why Mike liked that seat. And Mike, I think, started out playing in the room as a grinder, grinding 1-3 and 2-5. Wasn't successful in 5-10 from a lot of the poker players I know that have played with him. He slowly started playing less and less off stream, and the stream became his full-time job. And then eventually he wasn't playing off stream at all, and he was invited to a lot of juicy games. And I know that a player with his competency, like he's crushing all of these games, a player with his competency should be able to go to like a very juicy 5-10 game that's got 3 whales on it and do very well, but he refused all those spots.
Yeah, and now jumping forward and like knowing and seeing his godlike play, so we could assume that he should be easily doing well in those games as well. But looking at like maybe a streamlined of all these lineups that you've seen from 2015 to today in Stone's life, you said he started playing less and less off stream in those juicier games. Would you say that the regulars that were actually the best in those games, they got better over time, and that the fact that maybe Mike didn't like put in any work into his game, so that he was kind of not being able to beat higher than 1-3, 2-5, because all these players between 2015 and 2019, yeah, maybe they put in some work and actually looked at ranges and like how to construct the 3-betting range properly, and now they were just giving him a lot of trouble because he just couldn't handle the 3-bet pots and that additional pressure that comes from these regulars anymore. What would you say about these other
3-bet pots? He was calling in the small blind with like a 7 high to a 3-bet. I think he was handling it just fine.
Yeah, later on.
Yeah. I think that the pros in the room, he underestimated them because I'm very good friends with most of them. And they notice when he's not playing off stream at all. And they notice, so Mike wouldn't play over 1-3 or 2-5, 5-5 on the stream. They would invite him to the bigger games off stream. We used to have a Thursday night game at Capital Casino that was like a 10-25 with a $50 straddle, and he was invited all the time. He never went, but he'd play on stream the 25-50, no problem, and clean up.
Yeah, but
and it just didn't. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
Yeah. But it would be the same players. Also, one big factor. He did occasionally play a 1-3 off stream at this one. It's like a bowling alley that has a poker table, and they I don't know if they asked him to be a host or something, but my co-commentator Jake would play in the game with him, and he used to text me like, "Oh my God, this guy with this like 50, 60, 70% VPIP on the live stream is sitting here playing like 5% of hands, and he's knitting sweaters, he's folding everything." So it was just a lot of discrepancies between the live stream game and off live stream.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, people also observing that. And were there also, people who really press a bit harder and like kind of started mocking him for not playing those games? Because that's usually how things go, aren't they? Like if somebody plays in live stream games, I would think at least that some players would say, well, yeah, you're crushing those live games, but why don't you play in our game like 5-10? Why don't you now play here and start beating us as well, or play with us? I'm kind of surprised that people didn't try that.
Yeah, I don't think they did. I would say that the player pool in Sacramento, I think like they want to tread lightly. It's not a massive player pool. It's still a smaller city relative to like LA or something. And I think generally people tend to be polite and didn't say anything to his face, but the word was going around and everybody was a little confused. But then Justin would say things like, he said it to me, "Oh, well, Mike just went on a huge downswing and lost like 20, 25K." And no one would be with him all the time. So people would be like, "Well, he was on a downswing. He was just on a heater. Oh, look, he's on another heater." But for me, it didn't make sense. Like I was saying the other night, the graph was just exponential. It wasn't going up and down and slowly up like you see pretty good pros have. He wasn't having the down portion of his graph. And when Justin would say to me, "Oh yeah, he had a huge downswing," and I'd text the guys, they would be like, "We haven't seen him in a while. What are you talking about?" A lot of it didn't make sense.
Yeah, and I think that why do you think people didn't really see him for what he was earlier? Why did people actually think he was on a heater? Let's go the other way and say, why did people think he was on a heater?
I think the eyes that were, and I think this is a very complicated story with a lot of variables. So early on, things have changed. I think the progression of the cheating changed. I think I would say like the manner at which he was cheating has changed. The manner at which he slowly exposed it, becoming more blatant change. I think initially he was more hidden about it. And so things like progressed, right? So I think towards the end, it was more of like an analytical point of view where people didn't understand that he wasn't playing off stream. He was playing 12 hours a week and making like 20,000 or 10,000 an episode, playing for 4 hours, and just the math didn't add up. Like no one could run this good, and we were all waiting for the heater to end. Mm-hmm. Is that an answer to your question?
Yeah. I think part of it. Maybe I should ask one more follow-up, and that's how do you think is the ratio between professional players who are really winning players in the Stones life or were over those 3 years and could actually make a fair assessment statistically over like a guy like Mike Postle, who's actually having the abilities beside until you showed the abilities to at least, to basically see it as as basically the only commentator in the end. So huge compliment to that, because you had the ability in the end to step up and say, well, this is not right. But like who other had like, would you have suspected to have the statistical ability to see through that insanity that has happened?
So I think the professional poker players didn't have the time to watch all the streams. I don't even think they barely watched when they were on it towards the end. I think initially it was great, but I think a lot of them would play eventually if there was like a good lineup. I don't think I don't think one commentator was there enough to see the pattern. And I almost think that Justin didn't have professional poker players in there just so that it wouldn't be noticed. Also, and I talked about this last night, I think compliance is a big factor in all of this. I think that day in and day out, they're told Mike Postle is a god. I think that enough people were told that there was an investigation and nothing came up because there were whispers of this. I think the commentary, like I did, trusted Justin and trusted that he was upholding the integrity of the game. It's hard when you're doing commentary when you're told to be nice, and a crazy hand happens and it's lots of action and the audience loves it, and your tech is putting up this meme, even though they could put them up themselves too. Everybody could put up the memes. It's hard to be sitting there and saying, this doesn't make sense. I mean, I've always been a rebellious pain in the butt to my parents, and I don't care what people think of me, so I said it. But I think it's hard generally for people who are told to have a fun show, to not say anything bad. I think it's hard for them to come out, even if it looks egregious. Like that 4-5 hand, that was really bad. And I think the Marley hand was really bad, and I just wasn't going to buy what Justin was trying to sell me. Justin Train, my co-commentary in my video, who was like, oh yeah, he's the best in the world. And I was like, no, he's not. This is bullshit. Like, this isn't a thing. How is this a thing? Like, if you just, and Justin plays poker. Like, if you just play even recreationally, you know that it's not a thing. You're not going to call off your entire stack. Maybe if your stack's $80, you might want to YOLO it and call off with a 4 or 5.
It was only in PLO, basically. In PLO, you can do that stuff. That's really funny. I mean,
yeah, but it's like it didn't make sense to me, and I just needed a set of eyes and someone with a little bit more time than me to look through all the data.
Sure. I think something that we get, like some takeaways that I've had looking at this whole matter, also in hindsight, looking at the commentary, is that people don't have the skill set in general, like I would say 95%, to basically look at this rationally. But I mean, we're all emotional creatures, and we all have that up to some degree, and you almost have to train your brain to go the other direction, to think rationally about the whole matter. And people, right, they play poker in their free time. Why would they go into this rational process of thinking and basically try to figure out, okay, what makes up for a heather and what makes up for something being fishy? Because first of all, it would just tell it, or talk it down to luck. And that's how it usually goes in the poker industry. If somebody being big in a tournament, if somebody has like a huge upswing cash game, at first, your first reasoning with it is it's luck. And that comes mostly from a place of emotion. Whereas then if you had at least some guidelines on how to think about it, maybe you would have some indicators of, okay, what is actually his strategy? Is there some pattern of strategy behind it? If yes, how does it look like? What are the opening ranges? What are the 3-betting ranges? Where does he actually get his EV from? Not like how he's running good, or where does he actually, make plus EV decisions?
Well, if you look at even Mike Postle himself, his tweets for his redeeming hands, I'm like, does he even know poker? Because the man who is this god, I don't even think knows poker. I think I gave him more credit than he deserves, because those tweets really show that he is cheating. And it's amazing to me that he thought that there was some redemption involved. Also, I think like people were taking this outlier situation and making it the mean, making it the average. Like this was his average. And that's just not possible. I think as a society, we are emotional creatures and we make decisions, unfortunately, with our emotions. But we're leaning towards a data-driven society where we're using data to drive our decision-making, and at least any successful businesses are, and hopefully successful people.
Yeah.
But
I think when we're forced to, then we already go there. Like you can see that insane switch from people being fooled by this guy for almost 2 years, maybe 1.5 years, especially as commentators. They not only were fooled as the players, well, the players had even a harder time because they didn't see all the footage. Commentators saw maybe 50% of the footage sometimes if they were there on a regular basis. But the commentators had even more access to that. And then because, they were instructed to basically not talk in a negative fashion, that even added on more to the probability of being fooled by this guy. So now all of a sudden they're basically hyping him up with all these memes and him being a god, and it's just all this perfect story. What I really find suspicious though, when I remember the day one of where I looked into it, which was like maybe 8 hours after Joey Ingram did, was the interview he had with Justin Kuraitis, because for me it was all about at first looking at it from like, okay, who is this guy? And I try to look at something I mentioned also in our conversation before. I like Robert Greene, how he thinks about matters, about humanity. And he basically has this concept of negative capability, the ability to basically be able to look at multiple ideas at the same time from a different angle. For example, this guy is guilty, this guy is not guilty, this guy is partially guilty, and try to have those ideas in your head at the same time and work on them parallel without like immediately judging on one. And then you could ask yourself, well, if this guy wasn't guilty, would he behave the way he behaves? If this guy was guilty, would he also do that? And then I just looked at him, and at some point, like after 4 or 5 hours, like, also especially seeing the interview, listen to his brother basically telling us that he was an angle shooter in his childhood and would cheat all day. And then listening to his thought process, it just raised up the probability of him cheating like every single time by quite a notch.
I think that for me, not only were his wins statistically improbable, I mean, at the rate of which he was winning, not any hand in a vacuum per se, but that combined with his cognitive unawareness of his thought process of walking through a hand. Anytime I spoke with him or in that interview, so let's talk about that interview. From what I understand, enough people had complained to Justin regarding Mike's play. So Justin said, I'm going to bring him into the booth. We're going to make this all better. And he's going to talk about because I think Justin trusted that maybe Mike had enough poker knowledge from being Ante Up Player of the Year, all this stuff. He's going to bring him in the booth. He's going to discuss his thought process, and it's going to be all better. And I think it actually worked out the other way. I don't think it benefited anyone. And he just sounded like a guy who cheated on his exam. He didn't know the answers. There was no deconstruction of the process at which he made his decisions. It was just some dude talking about, I put him on ace king. And this was not the way a lot of my successful poker friends talked through hands. And I know that I got a lot of heat from this, like Daniel Negreanu brought it up when I was talking to him about it, that like not a lot of people can convey their thought process through a hand. And not everyone has like a perfectly constructed thought process, but at least you have a thought process. At least you made those decisions on your own. I'm not the best at discussing why I pull triggers when I'm in a hand, but I also know that I made that decision and I can talk to someone about why. It may not sound like a pro, but I still thought through that. And I don't think he thought through any of his decision making. I think he just, he knew where he was. And I think given his previous experience, it was easier for him to cheat because he knows sizing well. Maybe that's all he knows, because I don't know what else he knows at this point. It seems like not a lot.
What's happening here? Yeah, I just disconnected there for a second. Anyway, what I noticed also is that, of course, he would. I think the way he phrased it in that interview, and that was in January, so it still took a long time for people to basically.
Oh, that was in January. Okay, I was wondering last night. I couldn't remember what the date was on that. And I'm so tired of looking at the footage, so I didn't bother checking.
It's been a very long time, and I think not many people have seen this interview, because I actually went into that interview very quickly because I thought, well, there I really see him talking. And by him just sitting on the table, I didn't catch on to all these subtle things, maybe because I wasn't aware of it yet, right, of like this head thing and what people really were investigating and finding out. But what I was basically looking at is something that I had at least some expertise in. Is like, okay, what does a good poker players sound like. I know some poker players who are really good intuitively. They might not be, well studied or they looked into the game, but they really have a really good intuitive understanding of the game. But they would talk about it. What they would definitely not say is, yeah, I don't quite remember that hands, but, and then like, why? And he's basically saying he has a shitty memory. That's what he's saying. Either he wants us to believe that he has a shitty memory, that's version A, which is basically downselling his skill, which he later on didn't, which is a contradiction in itself. Or he's basically having a shitty memory. There's only those two ways, right? Either he has a shitty memory or he wants us to believe he has a shitty memory. Now, what is it, Mike, right? And I believe he actually might have a shitty memory. And if that's true, how many other poker players do you know of that are good and are winning at, especially at this rate, have a shitty memory? Maybe some, but very, very, very few. I've actually, maybe I should ask some winning poker players, do we have a shitty memory? Maybe some have. Maybe some intuitive players might not have a good memory, but they have maybe that muscle memory that reminds him of like physical things in the hand, less about the hand, but more of what they pick up on people emotionally and physically and all that. Maybe at least that he could have brought up. He could have brought up at least some reads. I mean, if you've won 250K and you're basically questioned, like at least bring some nuggets, bring some, okay, well, and instead of like generalizing, which is exactly what his strategy was, he said, well, I'm really good into psychology. Use all those generalized terms, which is really a good way of people lying instead of going a little bit in depth. He could have just dropped some nuggets saying, like, he observes, I don't know, the pulse or something. Maybe he was, he could say, well, I'm afraid of telling people that I watched their pulse. I mean, these days, a lot of people know it anyway. And not many people watched that interview anyway. So, I wouldn't have told
Yeah,
people.
A lot of my really successful poker playing friends have almost photographic memories of the hands they've played. And actually this summer, Andrew Barber and I were playing the Omaha 8 1500, and I told him that I wanted to talk to him about a few hands, and I wrote them down, and he kind of got upset because I couldn't remember every hand. But I think very successful poker players have a photographic memory almost with the hands that they play, and they have to remember key spots because they want to go back and run it by with friends to see if they did the right thing.
And then yeah, I agree. Like I would say most of them, and I was just also actively looking for, okay, what skills does this guy have, or what skills could this guy have? And I just didn't see that many from his interview. Like I even wrote down all his words that he said, and I just didn't see a skillful person in poker.
Right, you're waiting for this hidden genius to emerge.
Yeah.
Right, during the interview, and it doesn't happen. And it was the same thing with me before we do Veronica and Friends. I remember a few times I'd chat with him. I remember I brought up a hand against Frank, and I was like, Mike, what were you doing? He's like, me and Frank. He just never gave me any sort of. There are people that are like on the spectrum that are just like geniuses, and maybe it doesn't show very well because they're socially awkward or something. There's like nothing hidden in him. There was nothing. I was searching for a while. I'm like, this guy is crushing every single game. He's playing better than any guy I know, any girl guy. And then when I talk to him, it's like he barely speaks English, I'm not saying he's dumb. I think he probably has talents in a lot of other places, like, a very savvy cheater that made it for 18 months. But it didn't make sense to me. That along with, the statistics.
Plus, also, I try to watch out for positive things, making him a skilled player in terms of a live player. I mean, I know of many live players that I've encountered in the last 5 years, and I see some life skill set in them. How they observe people, where they're looking at, and a lot of times he was just not really looking at people, and that's like very obvious from the beginning. And it's like, yeah, how does he now make this? What does he make the decision based on? He's not really looking at the guy. How is he ever going to use his alleged life skill set in this instance.
Right. You would assume that he was like really in tune with the game if he's doing simply like reading players and I don't know. He was almost out of touch. It's almost like he was not in tune with anyone or anything. He wasn't exploiting anyone. It didn't seem. So.
Yeah, and then also you could think of somebody like Hossein Ensan who won the main event. I've played some Palo with Hossein, not many other games with him than that. I mean, it was maybe like 2 hours. But also when you look at many hands from Hossein Ensan, you can see that his life skill set, I think, is actually quite high. I mean, you look at what he does, and that he's really also always relaxed at the table. That whole way that he takes himself, that's just something that you can at least notice, right? Whereas I just didn't see those live poker skill sets in Postle right away. Just didn't see it. So
yeah.
That I think was quite a tell. And then along with his insane hands that I saw afterwards, it was just like, okay, there's
along
no
with
way.
Him talking to the camera, saying, "Where are the cards?"
Well, that might have been some delay or something. I'm not quite sure.
No. I mean, he was sitting in seat. I think he was sitting in seat 9 or 8. Sometimes we play 8-handed, sometimes 9-handed. And he turned to the left up to the camera, and he was like, "Where are the cards?" or whatever he said.
Is that like proof enough, like somebody who can read lips? Because I saw that a little bit, and I didn't want to go like too deep into that.
I just think it's almost like everything is now becoming evidence, and now I'm becoming weary of every single thing I see. I'm trying to remain objective. I'm trying to remain logical, but at the same time, my head is spinning with all of this. I'm a little overwhelmed with how much has come out.
Yeah, a friend of mine reminded me of that, and he said, there's just so many biases out there, and I'm aware that we are not aware of that easily. We have so many biases that we can fall under, and then especially confirmation bias. If you think that he's cheating, you're just going to see more reasons to believe that way. So that's.
But I think as a poker community, okay. So first of all, the numbers are objective. Mm. We can't change the numbers. That's number one. Number two, I think more often than not, people would have preferred to say that I was wrong. I think people initially, even some pros messaged me and said like, "Hey, a lot of guys play paired boards like this. Like, you're probably wrong. Just, send me some more hands with paired boards and I'll tell you if he's playing like this all the time." And then he later on messaged me and apologized. But I think we were looking for me to be wrong. I really think people thought I was full of crap initially. I think that it is harder for people to get to a place of admitting that he was cheating. And I think for the most part, the higher level players are as objective as possible. We're really good at policing ourselves in the poker community, and that's generally done in the most objective way possible. Like, no one is gossiping about him and saying they're jealous of him. These are not the motivations for us looking into this.
Yeah, I mean, when Phil Galfond chimes in and says, he probably thinks that he's cheating, it's like 0% gossip. Phil is just dropping in that line. Then it's just like, okay, probably not worth looking into it that much more in terms of guilty or not guilty. It probably just is, right? I mean,
so I'm assuming that you watched the Mattisau interview.
I did listen to it at some point, and yeah, I mean, it's really interesting. There's this guy on Twitter, a poker player, I think his name is, and he's basically dropped some things in terms of what people would say if they're guilty, and this whole 100,000% on changing realities, dividing in the percentages so that you can somehow convince yourself that you're not lying. I think that is really interesting. I think I want to get more into that.
Yeah, and I posted his initial text to me in our group chat. I posted that on 2+2, and it was kind of like the same thing, just ranting about how good he is. I didn't post everything. I know that he told Joey Ingram that he wasn't aware of any investigations and nothing nothing was told to him. But then when he texts me, my lawyer asked me to send him all the texts. And so I was taking screenshots, and I noticed that he did text me that he knew about the investigations. And there were many investigations, and they all came up clean. So he also lied there. When he was texting me, it was more like I'm ruining his life rather than I'm not guilty. And I think looking back or listening to what he's saying, I think he's more upset that he did something and I caught him than he is for actually doing what he did.
That's really interesting, and also seeing like patterns between. I think if you want to analyze this, you always have to go back into similar situations. Like, okay, what did these people do? Did they naturally? Is it a natural thing for a human being to basically text you back and say, "Hey, Veronica," and try to guilt shame you into "you're ruining my life," right? So basically saying, "Yeah," just trying to make you feel guilty about that instead of saying, "Hey, Veronica," is it not more natural to say, "Well, look, I really didn't do this. Why are you doing this?" Well, in the second part, that would be also trying to make you feel guilty. But in the first part, it's more like, I haven't done anything. And how can I make this right? How can I prove it to you that that wasn't the case? Especially because allegations got more serious and people were more chiming in saying, well, he is guilty. Well, why is it not his initial urge to prove people wrong in the sense of that he's actually innocent? No, he actually went after people and saying he's the boss instead of actually showing some concerns about this and say, well, how can I show you guys that I'm actually just skilled or that I made some good decisions here?
When I first contemplated doing this, I weighed out worst case scenarios for both situations. If I do it or I don't, what's the worst case scenario if I do it, and what's the worst if I don't? And I decided to go forward with this. But I think if I had been wrong, I think the tweets would have been, it kind of would have been shunned a little bit. I would have not been able to go back into Sacramento for sure. But I think, like, if you look at 2+2, the first page or two are kind of, making fun of me coming out with this. I don't know if those got deleted or not because I haven't gone back in a while, but people were basically saying that I was making it up and I was jealous or I got fired. And so I was mad. I didn't get fired. And so I think it would have come out. I think Joey would have texted me and said, like, I haven't seen anything. This is, I appreciate you trying to figure this out, but I think this guy's just like genuinely good. And I would have apologized. And I actually was texting Berkey, I think on Saturday night or Sunday, saying like, oh, I think I'm wrong. Like, what if I'm wrong? Everyone's saying that they don't see anything. Because the first few days, people were saying they didn't really see anything. Like, some stuff was out of line, but in a vacuum, there's really nothing wrong with each hand. By Monday morning, everything had changed. But I think it would have blown over. Stone's Live would have been fine, and I would have had to never step foot in Sacramento again. I don't think it would have hurt anyone besides like a small bruising. I don't think it would have hurt anyone long term if I was wrong. Like, what do you have to hide if you're not cheating?
Yeah, I think that their reputation wouldn't have gotten slandered by just you making those tweets if you were wrong. I don't think so.
I know that Justin called two people one on Saturday after I posted Saturday night, and then on Tuesday after I posted, and he basically said that I was doing this to increase my social platform and get more followers. And I'm like, what in what world is this something that I would do? I have, like, that is not even a consideration for why I would post. Why would I ruin a man's life potentially and shut down a live stream because I want to gain more followers and be wrong? Like, everyone's just going to jump on this. Oh, Veronica, you're right. We don't need to look at any evidence. Let's get you followers. I mean, that is so ridiculous. It's the same argument that Justin told me. Everyone's so jealous of Mike, and that's why they're gossiping. It's very juvenile.
Yeah, I think though on a neutral level, the fact that some people actually do that, I was very aware of that as well. Like when I was on day one, that I don't want to do this. I definitely do not want to gain followers through this whole. And I didn't know that these videos were going to get so many views here, but I was definitely not trying to gain some followers and then be wrong, because that would have probably ruined my channel quite a bit on YouTube if I was wrong about that. Like really taking such a harsh stance on day one, and like I was less saying Mike is the god jokingly like Joey, but I was actually saying, I think this guy's guilty. I just didn't see any other plausible way, and I thought about it for quite a bit. For hours, watching the footage, watching the interviews, and I think just the whole puzzle with the brother, like telling that he's like about his character. It was his own brother, man. I mean, that's just too much for me. I mean, at some point, adding to that all the things. If your own brother says you're a cheater, you probably are a cheater with that.
I mean, I understand that the context of that interview with his brother was just more like joking and having fun, and it was a childhood story. I'm sure that there's a lot of people who don't cheat that have like maybe done something bad as a child, and then now they're grown up and they think better of it. But given everything else, yes, it's atrocious.
Yeah, I mean, he stressed it though. Like I certainly cheated when I was a kid in some games or the other. I think almost every kid has at some point, right? And then you maybe get caught. Like maybe you realize with 8, 9, 10 years at some point that this is actually not the way you want to go, right? You don't want to cheat in games. But we probably have all cheated in some games when we were a child. But then would our siblings go out there and say, hey, my brother is just the best cheater ever? He would find the angle. No, that my brother would never have done that, right? Saying that on an interview. Like
I'll just tell you that if like someone in my family was cheating, not like in a board game, but like it was in a massive cheating plot like this, I would call them out too. I think my values and my morals are stronger than connections with people who are cheating. That's just the way I am. I don't have any like mafioso loyalties to people. I just don't. I can't. I won't have people in my life who don't have the same values as I do.
Yeah, like in like high integrity and it's extremely important. And if others don't have that value, then they're out of there. And would you say that some of the people that have also gone after you at first, who were clearly very loyal to Mike Postle, I mean, I try to also be empathic towards that kind of behavior and ask myself, well, there's really a strong emotional connection between those people and Mike Postle, and that's where they're defending them. But then, they're going also on the offense, right? They're taking action and basically trying to fight you, for instance. And basically, I mean, how was your take on that? How did you deal with that?
I'm still kind of bothered by a lot of things. Number one, a lot of people who were publicly ganging up on me privately apologize. I also think this has been a big psychological learning experience for me, in a way that I've been watching different people process the information differently. Although it's easy for me to just get angry and say, all the information is out there. How are you not getting this? And I stopped responding to people saying, but where's the evidence? People texting me like that about a week ago, because I just think they're just being intellectually lazy at this point. But at the same time, I think I have to understand that people process things in different ways, and some people are more emotionally connected to the situation than I gave them credit for. Some people also probably just had so much trust in Justin and in Postle that they couldn't think anyone that they know so well would do this. I don't know. I'm still torn at responses. I was, up until yesterday, very torn at a few friends of mine who were close to me in the game, but I think they finally came around. I spoke to one of them this morning. I spoke to Frank this morning. But it still frustrates me that I can't expect us. We're complex. We're dynamic as people. We're not computers processing data. I would prefer that people look at things more objectively and process information. I try to do that. I force myself to do that. I try not to be an emotional decision maker, but not everyone's like that. And I can't have that expectation on people. I also think people come to terms with things differently. Some people, I'm the type of person who, if like you're my best friend and you're cheating people or you're a scam artist, I'm dropping you. You're out of my life. I'm hurt, but I'm dropping you. But some people want to have this like mafia loyalty, and it's not my thing. I won't surround myself with that.
Yeah, and also, I mean, I see that in poker quite a bit. People hate to disagree. If there's just something that people really feel strongly about, and in poker, I think people are in a tendency feeling more strongly towards some things that they believe in is true, and then they're really fighting for that, and there's really no other way. Like if they believe in something, how you should probably behave at a poker table, and we can go maybe to that into later bit. And if they believe that that's the way to go, they would just not take any other thing, or not feel any kind of empathy towards that, and just think that you're the worst for behaving that way. And I think the fact that I saw that in other areas other than cheating, where cheating is much more severe, just didn't even surprise me that much. I think about the people who were still backing him for a very long time. I was a bit surprised about Moneymaker at first, especially because of the 4-5 offsuit hand. But then I also saw the reasoning, like it was his winning main event hand, right? So maybe to Moneymaker, it made some sense that Postle basically used his main event hand to beat him. That's also the story that Justin Kuraitis came up with. Like Justin comes up with all these things, these memes and these background stories, or 5-9 offsuit. What was that? 59ers or some really random garbage shit. Oh, we're talking of football, I believe. And then Mike and Justin, they had a very, very similar way of thinking. I mean, no wonder were they friends. They were always coming up with these stories. They loved what they created together, apparently.
Yeah, I think that they adjusted the cheating method as people started complaining, because everybody went to Justin. And so Justin, I think people were complaining about the phone to Justin. And so Justin and Mike decided to do the bone conductor in the hat. They were both speaking the same language, the jealousy, the, everybody is gossiping kind of language. Yeah, I think a lot of it worked because maybe we are such emotional creatures and our responses were more emotional to what they were doing, rather than looking at the data. I wanted to go back to like people having like these they want to have a belief system and they dig their heels in the ground about it, like you were saying at the poker table. And it is frustrating to me because I think like we shouldn't have a set of beliefs. We should believe in like the evidence and the facts and then adjust that as that changes and be open to being wrong. And I think like in this case, people had a belief system initially that Mike Postle was not cheating, and I just wanted them to look at the data, and they were sticking to their beliefs. I think it was a hard pill for them to swallow.
And people didn't really want to hear it. And also, you also had known Justin for quite a while.
Yeah.
On JFK, and he has. I think you might have some also insight on the way he thought, apart from all these memes, and I don't know how much you can tell here on the stream about the whole belief system. I think he's also on Pinterest. I found it also after you mentioned like the whole "I'm not the devil" thing, and
Yeah. So I think
about that.
So there's like two sides to this. There was the Justin I thought of before I realized he was involved, and then there was the Justin I thought of after all of this came to light. And I will have to say that I didn't think he was involved up until like a week after, and it now all kind of makes sense. I think he's just a huge narcissist, and I think this was I think he was like the mastermind of this. I think his ego was greater than his poker ability, number one, because I think he thought he could sell this to the world. I think he thought poker was not a game of data. I think he thought poker was a game of, just talk around the room. Yeah, Mike Postle is the greatest poker player. Can't you see? All his wins equate to greatness. That's not necessarily the case because most good poker players are not results oriented, right? You can you can do the wrong things and get rewarded, which is what's hard about poker for me. And then he thought, well, I would say, well, he's winning so much. And he's like, well, he loses too. He's on a downswing. And that equates to not cheating. And that didn't make sense to me. I think he thought he could sell this to people. I think when he brought him in the booth, he was like, look, everybody, see, all better now. But he didn't realize that this is not, he can't fool us like this forever. He doesn't understand. He doesn't have I tweeted about it, that he doesn't have a understanding of at least the basic understanding of poker, and that it doesn't work like that. That we're not looking at the results of our actions. We're looking just at our actions and what are the best actions to take with the least amount of mistakes.
And also what's very important here is some people might believe now, listening to this, well, we're being unfair to Justin, because for Justin, nothing's really proven, especially because he wasn't playing himself. But,
I would say if that's true, then he is so completely unaware and so ignorant to everything. It's almost as bad as being involved. At this point in the lawsuit, it doesn't matter if he knew or didn't know. He didn't do anything about it when he was told about it. So there's no difference at this point.
Yeah, exactly. I think, even letting this whole thing happening under his nose, I mean, he kind of deserves quite a bit of punishment for like the financial loss that you guys have all suffered from, even if it wasn't his whole plan.
But it was. He patronized us all. He patronized, like when I went to him, when Casey went to him, apparently he was supposed to have lunch with Jake. He just tells us the same thing. There's been an investigation, nothing's shown. And he thought that he could just pull the wool over our eyes. And unfortunately, that's not the case.
What I found particularly interesting is about Mike Postle, the whole wine thing. And also, you guys are drinking a lot of wine. And Mike
we live close to Napa Valley. What do you want from us?
I'm all about wine. Is I like wine. I wouldn't say otherwise. I would just not drink it at the poker table, and especially not so much. Maybe we'll take a glass. But
then you can't come to Veronica and Friends.
Is it okay if somebody drinks a glass? And does it have to be
no. We didn't pressure anyone to have to drink, but everyone knew coming into the game that there would be wine, and it was more of a fun game. It wasn't. Yeah. We didn't want any. We used to call them GTO bots. We didn't want any GTO bots.
Robots.
Yeah.
Waste the chips.
We wanted to have fun. We wanted people to splash some pots and play some hands. We didn't want everyone to just wait for kings and aces. It was encouraged.
Understandable. But what I really noticed about the wine is that, also thinking about willpower specifically, I mean, wine lowers people's willpower barriers. And when you specifically look at Mike, that one session where he also was interviewed by Justin, he was saying, well, a lot of wine was flowing. It was also one of his biggest winning sessions. And what I think is that, like, as a cheater, I think that you would at least have some willpower involved with you trying not to cheat too hard, right? Because let's assume you're in God mode. Let's see your opponent's hole cards. I really thought about that for quite a bit. Like, if I saw my opponent's hole cards, wouldn't I then try to at least use, like, I could obviously own them every single time that I want to, but then I would maybe think about, well, what should I do here in order to conceal this information?
You're letting the one big thing, you're missing one big thing out of this equation, is the ego. His ego wouldn't let him lose.
That is one thing. And I think he was still having at least, I mean, some intelligence, even though maybe debatably it wasn't that much, but he would at least use it sometimes to not make certain plays. For example, like calling the fourth pair against a 7-deuce offsuit bluff. I don't know, maybe he didn't even see the hand, he was cheating then, who knows? But maybe he would use at least some reasoning some of the time that he didn't do it. But then when he had some wine and was drinking a lot, his willpower barriers would be so much reduced that now all of a sudden he had no self-control anymore. He would just go wildly. Like, I think that's exactly when he got triggered so much, when his ego was even worse than at times when he wasn't drinking, because willpower barriers are down because you've been drinking so much wine, and now it's just a free for all. You just go blasting off against these people because you see their whole cards and you just own them every hand so hard, and you even laugh at their faces. That, I think, was like really showing very, very strongly in those sessions where we were just hammered. He would just have no self-control.
I have a theory about the laughing. So
maybe
when he had the bone conducting headphones in, and Justin was wearing his microphone, I think Justin was telling him the hands. A friend of mine who's a regular in the room told me that he did hear Justin once say, like, 9 of spades, blah, 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 tell him the hand. And he assumed he was talking to the tech. But so Justin, I think, was telling him the hands. And I also think he was telling him, like, yeah, get this piece of shit, or yeah, telling him some sort of funny joke while they're crushing this poor person who has
makes
no hands. And I think he just like started laughing when he would hear that, and they started turning it into like a joke, something funny, and it's sad.
And all these news, but this could be now confirmation bias, us now making sense of this and saying, well, it could have been like that, but it could be one of the, like, to me, it sounds very plausible. It doesn't have to be like that, but yeah, I mean, I guess they had a lot of fun cheating at some point, especially drinking wine. You're not like, your morals maybe go out the window completely if you're just basically.
I mean, if you're cheating, you probably didn't have too many to begin with. So.
That is true. That's true. But there's also this story of this one man where when he lost, what is it, the prefrontal cortex? I mean, he like something fell on his head, right? And then he lost the prefrontal cortex, where the willpower and the not the animalistic brain is centered. And then he would just, obviously have no self-control anymore. And I think, that's just exactly happening to some people when they are hammered. They just don't really have access to that rational brain and just do whatever the heck they want. And
yeah, I barely have access to it when I'm sober. So yeah, it's tough.
You think so? Why would you say that?
Oh, I'm just joking. I think I'm a little more reckless than most people. I think I'm a little more outspoken than most people, and a little more rebellious, and I take probably too many risks. So
what would you say is like another risk that you've taken? Because even though you say that you take a lot of risks or you're rebellious, you still waited quite a bit for this to come forward. You were still careful. So you had something pulling you back.
Well, I mean, when I say that, I mean, like, I'm lightly saying, I moved my entire life to Silicon Valley for a job that I was unsure of, but I just, left a pretty good job that I had in a really nice place. But I would say, I mean, I take calculated risks. I'm not jumping off every cliff I see. I thought this through. I thought about the impact it would have on him and the poker community and Stones, which I really loved Stones. I really loved the live stream. It wasn't something I took lightly. And, I was putting myself at risk, although I think I was putting Mike more at risk than my own self, because it is horrible to be accused of something that you're innocent of.
So
yeah, I mean,
are you also saying that this whole live stream thing, you would love to continue it in another venue? Are we now planning to do something like that somewhere else in the future?
Yeah, I have nothing planned. I know Matrix Casino out here, which is right next to Bay 101. It's the weirdest thing. 2 of our biggest casinos are right next to each other. They were talking about doing a live stream, but I don't think they've moved forward with anything, and they might not now. But I think the live stream is just a wonderful tool for professional poker players to watch themselves and learn from themselves. I would still go play on Live at the Bike. I trust Live at the Bike. I've seen their setup too. They've got a completely separate room. The live stream is in a separate room than where the commentary is, just to let you know. Yeah, I mean, if Stones brought back their live stream and it was secure and it was run appropriately and they were transparent about their security measures, I'd play on it again.
Sure, I think that there's a lot of damage still being done to live streaming with this whole story. So, but it could be, on the long run, it could be really helpful because it makes games more secure, makes us aware of what's actually possible, and then so we might not make the similar mistake, at least not this in this form of negligence that it has been done here. And also now speaking about the live commentators. We were going to this a little bit earlier, but I want to ask you, what do you think, to what degree should we help hold people at least accountable to what they're saying on a live stream? And especially like praising someone like Mike this much and not like being naive about it, basically.
Yeah, naive is probably a good word. And I feel like I'm a broken record with this, but I think there was a lot of complacency. I think that we were told, again, to just have a good show, not to say anything bad about anyone, not to criticize. I think you can probably tell the level of competency with their knowledge of poker varies greatly. And then I think everyone else had not their own agenda, but their own style. Like if you look at Train, he was very like gimmicky and fun, and never wanted to dive deep into a hand, even though I think like he's got a fair bit amount of knowledge of poker. I think he's one of the few winners of Thirst Lounge that's doing well.
Okay.
I think Casey's a very competent poker player, and I think she did come out to Justin. She did see some stuff. And then you have other people who, you know, you can tell just like don't really, and I'm not one to talk because I'm not a professional poker player, but I mean, just basic stuff to me looked really egregious, that they were saying that this was wonderful. But let me just tell you one thing, to be devil's advocate. It's hard when you're in the moment and it's a live stream, it's a 4-hour show, and then once every half an hour you get this wonderful hand playing itself out. You don't want to sit there and be like, you know, you want to be like, oh my gosh, this hand, and and you're there to promote the show and you're there to promote the game, and you're trying to put a positive spin on something, and even you might think it looks fucked up, but maybe they felt like I did. Maybe they felt like they weren't secure enough in their poker knowledge to say something about it because no one would respect them if they did. That's maybe what they thought. I a lot of times don't talk to people about poker because I'm afraid that no one respects, you know, maybe my thought process or why I made a decision in a hand.
See, this is where I strongly disagree with most poker players who are on that kind of wagon and say, okay, you shouldn't really criticize. I agree. It's one thing to criticize players for their bad plays, which you shouldn't do. But it's also another thing to basically just ask questions. I think that we're way too soft in poker commentary, especially the whole story with Nick Schulman and like saying something at WSOP that he didn't quite agree with, you know, just because they had like a deep run in the main event doesn't really mean anything. And, you know, who are we to say that he's not really supposed to say X and Y on television? We're just not, you know, let the guy just do his job, which he's doing a really great work at, and just, you know, sometimes, you know, throw in a little bit of humor. And, you know, just some people who are on live streaming get criticized by someone else, like, yeah, just get over it. Like, it's just somebody stating an opinion. It's not really targeted at you, it's targeted at your play. And I think that's
here's the balance, though. Here's the balance. You're thinking about poker and you're saying, okay, on one side, I want to do like some soft commentary because I want it to be rec friendly. Like a lot of recreational players came to the game with no intention of trying to get better and just wanting to have fun, and they don't want to hear their shit play being commented on. Or do you want, and also a lot of, I would say, professional poker players don't want more information out there, even though there's a ton of free information out there to get better. And I think if someone wanted to get better, they already would. But I think a lot people are like, we don't want to spill secrets. We don't want people to know the real truth behind what's happening in the hands. So that's one side. And then the other side is like giving real feedback, which I think you could have a balance of both. I don't think they're mutually exclusive.
How many recreations do you think in percentage would actually encourage you to at least to some degree talk about strategy and learn something about the game?
I would say like 60-70% probably would prefer to become better.
Sounds like a reasonable number.
But at the same time, if you're trying to become better, you have to, it's a hard pill to swallow to say you suck.
Oh, no, right? I'm not saying that at all. That's like the one thing that I excluded. This is where I agree with people, where you should clearly not say that this guy sucks. And that's really,
it's something they have to do on their own to say, okay, maybe I'm not that good. Maybe I like this feel player thing is bullshit because we've moved on as a poker society, be a little bit more woke. But I think like a lot of them just want to be told some soft stuff.
Yeah, I mean, let's say, and I think that's also what your opinion is that you stated earlier. You have that one entertaining person in the booth, and then that other poker player really understands at least some factors and how a certain play has high EV or low EV, and where the expected value for play, in which direction it gets. Even though the pro will be oftentimes wrong, there's no doubt about it. It's not like we can just as poker players can just go out there and say, well, accommodate the hand perfectly. We will always forget some of the ranges that are being used, some factors, and we are not the solver. We can just run it, right? But we will probably at least a very high amount of the time have some idea. And when we do, then I think we can just say, well, this play probably doesn't, well, if it's like an obvious punt, like 7 deuce off and try to run above, whatever. But if it's just something that might be interesting, you could say, well, this play probably isn't, that good as an overall strategy, but, don't go after the person. Go after, like, not even go after the play, but just you can point it out. There's no harm done. People are way too sensitive for that kind of stuff.
Well, people are sensitive in general about everything. So, yeah, I think there's a small portion of the population that's really open to being wrong. And it goes into all of our belief systems, really open to being wrong, really open for constructive feedback and growth. And then there's some people who dig their heels in the ground and don't care.
Yeah, and I mean, we also talked about it briefly before starting the broadcast here. The more you go within any material in life, and in poker, I think it was very evident to me like 2 years ago until now. The more I got into the game, the more I realized like how little I knew. And I was also listening to these better players out there, and they were even more to that. Like if you listen to some of the best players in the world, they sometimes say that they don't know, they can actually admit that. But then some of the losing players, they would know everything.
Isn't that weird? It's like that in every aspect of life too. Yeah. Poker is such a reflection of so many things in life, I find.
I think it's a beautiful teacher. There's so many parallels, so many learnings that you can derive from poker. And that's why I love the game. I think more people should give it a go, at least on a recreational level. It doesn't have to be for, it can be for pennies. It doesn't really matter, just to learn something also about themselves and then also about other people. I think it's an insanely great tool to learn.
Agreed. And become better at decision making with data.
Absolutely. If you just had like a statistics class and then with poker and then looking at that from that angle, I think decision making will become so much better in this world. And I think that's really what it comes down to, realizing.
And I think Justin didn't know that. Doesn't know that. Justin thought people were still field players and would buy this. This is what we're talking about was Justin's downfall.
But this whole narrative that we have in the poker industry about this field player, it has been obviously there for quite a few years now, and I think it's gotten stronger. And I think that one of the things that I also wanted to accomplish with this broadcast and go towards is pointed out that we're going into a direction that this whole instance of Mike Postle is something that happened in that narrative that we're going towards to. And one of the things that I wanted to bring up is that whole narrative of the winning player, of the skill player, of the GTO player or something, and how negatively this impacts the whole poker industry as a whole and allows these things like Mike Postle actually to happen. Because people will believe it. People will believe in the fun play, in this whole feely player, which, yeah, maybe there's some out there, but they're not, they believe it in such a degree that's just self-delusion at some point.
Is a feel player a synonym for exploitative player?
I guess. I mean, they're just making up these terms, and they just whereas it has some truth in it, they just put it into an extreme. That's what a lot of people is. That's like where the narrative's heading. That's where the emotions are heading in poker. And one of the things that I wanted to ask you is, well, what is so wrong about being a winning poker player today?
Well, I don't think that obviously there's nothing wrong with being a winning poker player, but like in my game,
do you invite winning poker players?
No.
Oh.
So we didn't. Okay, so I would have a couple pros in my game every once in a while, but there were pros who agreed to have a fun time and not just sit there and try to rake up the chips. It was more like a home game, and we didn't want to get clobbered. We just wanted to have fun. And usually people with higher VPIPs would play. The skilled players would do better long term. The table, the majority of the players who were there on a regular basis, we would decide which pros were allowed in the game. I guess it's more for entertainment. I guess watching somebody who's stoic and folding a lot is not as fun as someone who's splashing around. Also, I think the poker used to be more field play, more chatter at the table. Like we look at the early 2000s, like the stars of poker. How many of them could make it now? Besides maybe Phil Ivey, but the game's changed so much. There's none of this like. Sometimes there were like personal vendettas at the table where someone just wanted to outplay someone else and like I'm just gonna stack him. It's not like that anymore. Now we're just trying to make the best decision possible in the best spots where we have the best equity. And people who are stagnant in poker maybe don't want someone who's in the game who's so much better and just making mathematical decisions. It's the same way we have conversations. Emotional conversations are so much more fun, especially when we're emotionally siding with each other. And then having like this Andrew Barber come in and be like, "Hey, everybody, let's be objective. Let's look at the data." Everyone's like, "Shut up! No one asked you." I think we're just like that as humans. Like you said earlier, we're just like emotional creatures. And
yeah, but then the question is, do we want to force it as a poker industry? And I mean, it's inevitable in some way that we're going a little bit into that direction, but we also have a role to play within that industry. And I think our opinions that we all have individually, they add up. And if we always push it like too much, and I think like in this whole private game sector, it's really going into a very terrible direction. I think what you've been doing and what you've been saying, I think it is fair and square. You just have like a rather small game still, like 1-3 and 2-5, which I typically had people labeled it as a home game, where you are basically friends with people and you don't necessarily just pretend to be friends in order to take their money, right? Which is a whole other story. So typically label this as a home game, also like a little bit when there was...
It was not predatory at all, which I feel like you're alluding to that some games are. Yeah.
Right. There are different types. And then there's, for example, in Switzerland, there's a lot of games where people are smoking in those private games. And I call them more like the old school private games where always those same people would meet. And there's obviously a lot of cash.
Soft play, I'm sure.
Being what?
There's some soft play, like when the same
Yes,
players are playing with each other all the
play,
time?
money, people not being really liquid for their money. They're not good for the money. Somebody who is maybe running the game has to basically come up with the money for the players all the time. And then maybe would be a lot of rake in order to counterbalance people not being good for the money. There would be also the winners and so on and so forth. I think this is like a little bit old school. And a lot of the times, at least here in Europe, people are smoking in those games. I think in the US, it might be similar. So those games have been around for a while. And as a pro, you didn't you could participate in those games and you would have a higher hourly, right? You will make a lot more money in those games. It would be the best hourly you would probably get. However, it wasn't a necessity. And you didn't really have to do this in order to make a living at like some lower high stakes games. And that's what I would classify as old private games or old school private games. What I call the new school private games is like my concept of making it is whenever there's a reg who is maybe slightly falling behind the curve, we might call him a bad reg, notices that he's probably a little bit threatened by the poker industry, that he just cannot come up with the same win rates anymore. He creates this, what I call new school private games. He basically tries to play his usual game, get in there, talk to the fun players as much as possible, pretend to be their friend, like as hard as possible, and then convince that player to run games just with him and a couple of other fun players. This is what I call the new school private game, and I think it's one of the worst things that we're facing in the next 10 years in poker.
Yeah, and I think the private games that Aria is being accused of having, and I'm not 100% knowledgeable of what's going on at Aria, and I think there's multiple people saying multiple things, but they're blocking some of the professional poker players from being in there and saying that the list is full, but there's an open seat because they're waiting for a whale or someone to come in the game, and then like one professional poker player who's pretending to be friends with all of the whales is vacuuming up all the money. I kind of feel like that might be a side effect of the profession, kind of like in a way in my corporate office where someone who's maybe not as skilled technically is close to the boss and maybe gets a promotion because they know someone. Although I don't think like long term that works, or that's not as common anymore, but it's that kind of scenario. Yeah, it's I don't even know what to say about that. I feel like my game wasn't predatory. I have seen what I believe is predatory actions in games, where I sat in a 1025 actually. I got bought into a 1025, and I had half my action, just to be honest, and I watched what I thought was predatory action towards a really big whale who was losing a lot, and everybody was just um, I feel like lying to him and patronizing him. Just whatever he wanted, he got. So I mean I wouldn't categorize my game as that sort of game. Everybody wanted to be there. Everybody had to bring money. No one. People did loan me money, but I paid them back right away if I got stacked. Yeah, I maybe they're different. Maybe they're not. Maybe private games are not good. I don't think in California I'm not 100% sure that they have the same regulations for private games as they do in Nevada. So I'm not sure. I'm probably not as knowledgeable in this topic as.
Okay, I mean, I don't know much about the U.S. private games. I just know that here over in Europe, they are more happening at the casino, which I think is terrible. I think they should happen somewhere in private, and obviously, I would think that it shouldn't be like highly overrated. But it's not my business, especially if they're smoking. Like I don't participate in games where people smoke anyway. So
I know that there's a lot of private games in San Francisco, and I think in San Jose that a lot of people are locked out of because it's almost like not only are you a professional poker player, but you also have to learn to socialize very well. So you have to balance this like skilled play with, if you're being invited to these private games, they want you to maybe drink, they want you to have fun, and you're there for business. And then they don't like that because they're there to have fun and they make money a different way.
Sure.
So they don't understand, that this is your job.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's also a part of some of us like getting soft because you're like, even we call this social skills, right? Yeah, in some way we can label them as social skills, but on the other hand, maybe like having a drink, but what if you actually naturally don't drink? Like, how are you not a social person? I think, by labeling something as social, we automatically very easily would very easily label other people as not social. And the question is like, is that really true? Like that, well, because there's a lot of players who I think they're not that talkative, but when I talk to them, and also not from a poker standpoint of view, and I try to initiate a conversation with them and just be like a normal human being, they're actually quite sociable. You can start a conversation with them, and I think they would fit into a poker setting if everyone wasn't just, so ridiculous and so, so I don't know. So
maybe you wouldn't like Stones so much.
Actually, no, that's like,
it's a very, very fun social atmosphere at Stones, or it was at least the last time I was there.
Let's say it that way. I think like now smoking games I would exclude, right? The old school, like also more
it's so funny in Europe, and I was born in Europe. I was born in Poland. It's so funny to me when I go back home how much people smoke, because I feel like in America it's not really a thing. I know, I mean, people still smoke out here, but it's not. I don't know anyone who smokes, and it's not really a thing. It's becoming less and less of a thing. And then I go to Europe, and everybody and their dog is smoking.
It's something people do way too much, and also in a poker setting. And in Austria, it's tradition that people, it's a tradition that people smoke almost everywhere. Sometimes they had like a law passing that people would have to stop smoking at some point, but in casinos, still in a lot of places, people can smoke, especially
here. Unless they're Indian casinos, you can't smoke in them.
Yeah, that's obviously for
which
the
is amazing. I'm very happy about that. I wouldn't go. I get sick every time I go to Vegas just from all the
and your eyes hurt. I mean, it's just so annoying. And yeah, I mean, they can do whatever they want in private, and I don't care about those games. And I would say in like the game like Stones, and I watched a lot of footage, I would definitely easily fit in those games. I don't.
You're
think
an expert now. Stones.
No. But I'm
you
just
and Joey.
No, I'm just saying I would easily fit in those games because I would have quite a range of things to talk about, I guess. And I think people are quite adaptive in that sense once you get going and talk about some things at least. Maybe at first it would take some adaptation. What I think would be much more difficult is in games where there is that predatory bad rag who clearly would see me as a threat, right? That is obviously the game where people would constantly then point out that you would play a 25 to 30% VPIP instead of 40 to 50, right? Which, like a normal tag style is going to be in PLO 25, 30, maybe 35, maybe on a looser end. And then, of course, you can up it up to 40 and 50 if you want to add in some trash hands. But and people would, just try so hard in some of these settings to basically point out that somebody has not been playing hands, even if sometimes they didn't play hands. But
there's a guy at Stones named Robert who is a very snug professional poker player, and he's actually known for that. But he gets invited to everything because his social game is perfect. He knows all these movie quotes. He's very fun to talk to and very polite and respectful towards women, and like you can get a few grimy guys at a casino, but he's just like, his social game is perfect, and he's always invited on the stream, and he's always invited to games because they just like hanging out with him. So that's, I think, another aspect. I think almost if you're talking to field players or old school players, you're almost better off socializing more with them than you are worrying about your VPIP, even though they like that.
Mm-hmm. This thing, like I actually started playing poker in Australia in those free roll games where just random people.
Australia or Austria?
Australia.
Oh,
Australia.
Okay.
Yeah, so I was in those free roll games, and for me it was my second language, and I was just learning about Australian culture in poker games a little bit because I would usually hang out with other students. But then like 3-4 times a week, I would just go to these poker games, which I just discovered it. It was like, I was just hooked from the very first moment. And I would just go to these poker games, and it would be such different people from even another language. And I would learn about these people. I found that, I was just amazed by the social setting, about the whole social dynamics. And people would constantly joke about it. It wasn't like that serious. You literally know that this guy, I don't know, John or whoever was at the table, usually at this point of the night, he would say, well, it's a freaking free roll. I'm going to go all in now. Now it's done. I had enough fun. I had my 2 beers. And then he would just bust out 10th or something from 30 people, and you could just observe those patterns. And I thought it was a great social setting. And the interesting part about it is wasn't for money. It wasn't for money. And that's exactly the point. I thought that almost everyone was accepted in those games, even me as a foreigner, right? Because most of them, they were locals. Let's face it. Like, there were almost not any other students. I was back in Noosa in 2009. I would love to go back there, and maybe some people would still play poker in there. But I would just go to these games and be like probably one of the only foreigners in that game. And I was just totally accepted, because it wasn't for money. And I think at 1-3 to 5, this is really still very natural, and people will be not total idiots in that regard of being greedy and such. But then as you move to like 10-20, 25-50 and all those games, now it's all open season for like greedy people and like trying to hustle for the that money of the fun player and trying to make higher gains, right?
I think people are accepting in poker mainly because it's the ultimate equalizer, right? We all sit down. It's not like you can't go play in the NBA if you're not ever playing basketball, but in poker you can sit down after just like learning a week ago, or you can sit and you'd sit at the same table as Daniel Negreanu in the World Series. So it is the ultimate equalizer, and I think regardless of the amount of money you bring to the table. But I think that maybe there is.
And then I thought that is like the beautiful thing about poker, where everyone can just sit down and play, and you don't worry like about too much. But then these the poker develops as an industry, and I think not really in a positive direction, with all these people getting extremely greedy about trying to lock up the money, which I guess it's like a survival of the fittest games.
Greed is prominent everywhere, right? It goes into every industry, and whistleblowers take down thieves and people who are the Bernie Madoffs of the world. So I think that like it is, poker is a microcosm of the rest of life, and all the same things appear in the same pattern. But that's like such a generalized statement, right?
I guess so. But I mean, when you look at, I don't know. I mean, there's really nobody or very few people in the poker industry now that would bring up like a social skill description that I think is like somehow accurate. You said like this guy, he has a really great social skill set, and all these movie quotes, and he really he is really immersed into the culture. I think that's great. That's a great example.
Mike was too. Mike was very social, was very generous, tipped a lot, brought a lot of wine, was like a really nice guy. People were asking me, oh, was he a jerk, off camera? I'm like, no, not at all. He was a really nice guy, which is also why I think everyone got so angry. Because had he been this jerk, it would have been easy to just jump on the bandwagon initially, what it felt like, the bandwagon. But because he was such a nice guy, I think a lot of people were just hanging on so tight to him.
And I think to make a point about this whole dynamic, I think there's a lot of articles also being written in today's time about like nation self-esteem. And I think as we go down in nation self-esteem, what we can that's my opinion, what we can much less accept in others, for example, at the poker table, is people actually owning us and just being really better in skill. And people would, start to hate on that, especially if they didn't have that emotional connection with a person on another level. For example, somebody just trying, it is not enough anymore to have like that one guy and sit down in the poker game and basically try to play his best poker, which might include, being more stoic, right? If that's your best poker game that you bring to the table, that's just you trying to be good at what you're doing. And that's usually not a bad thing, but in poker, it started becoming one.
Well, I mean, there has to be a clear, defined what you mean by stoicism, right? Because like you can be quiet at a poker table, but still sort of interact with people and still play your best game. But is that different than having your headphones on, your hoodie, and like completely pushing everyone out and being actually not fun to be around at all? Because I think it's still a social game, right?
Yeah,
you still like, I can't come to a meeting at work with like sunglasses on and a hat and just like not talk to anyone. I have to interact with my peers.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I do is like I barely talk during hands, but between hands I would obviously always engage in a conversation if somebody wants to, and sometimes start a conversation myself. Like that's how I developed my social skills at the poker table a little bit. Just trying to sometimes engage in a conversation. And I actually enjoy poker a lot more in the US than here in Europe, not only because of the low rake, but because of the diversity of people. And
yeah, we don't like the Euros either.
That's also another thing. Like some dude, he tells me.
I can say that because I'm European. I'm just making it.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, you said you grew up in Poland, but the fun thing is, all these US dudes are like, yeah, we hate the Euros and stuff. Yeah, because they freaking are still connected to online poker, run solvers, and work on their game. That's why you're hating the Euros at the poker table. Of course, that's like the truth, and it's not even close. Like people in Vegas, they hate it every time when all these Euros come over and basically get a piece of the cake. Of course, that's why you're hating them, not because they don't know your culture. Yeah, a cultural thing is like the secondary tier, maybe that is also a reason why you might be hating on Euros. But the first is definitely money. Like money is number one, and it's not even close. And that's what I'm really sure about.
Number one is deodorant. I mean, I don't know if you've been to the World Series of Poker, but
okay, I mean, that's everyone.
And they're not always European, but
no. I mean, come on, like the American dude, like sitting there and it's like with his, I don't know, needing all the chairs. I mean, come on, and that's not a Euro thing. I cannot allow that.
The World Series of Poker this year was the best because, I feel bad. The guy who exposed himself, it was now shown that he's not fit to go to trial. He's mentally not fit, so it makes me sad. Like any sort of thing like that, you can just tell they're mentally ill. Like the woman who attacked me on Twitter and said just the most heinous things. I think she's mentally ill.
Yeah, I mean that is just sometimes you have to just totally disregard that because when somebody's
I don't want to talk shit about all the like Europeans that come in. Go Polska.
Yeah, I mean, America after all is a country of immigration, and that's what a lot of people get even, and just like hating on some people who now show up, for the World Series and taking some money out of poker. I mean, it's just let them play. And of course, every Euro likes to play in Vegas because rake is much lower. It's just
that's crazy. Insane. I don't know how much is the rake in where you play.
I mean, like in PLO here, a lot of the times the standard is 5%, 5 big blind cap in like a 5-5 game. So you get it in versus that annoying short stacker, because in the US, a lot of the times people play deep in those small games like 2-5, right? They buy in for 1,000. Yeah, in Europe, some people buy in for 250. And then they ship it with like their random double suited hand, and you're there with maybe aces, maybe a weaker hand, and you get in for 250, you rake 25. You're not really making that much profit. And sometimes they're going to have aces and you're going to have like, I don't know, double suited connected hand. And then, you're not making money on that either. Short stacks are the pain in Europe with high rake, especially in low stakes games.
The low stakes games are the worst for a rake relative to the blind.
Yeah.
I would say that the good thing about Stones was it was a stack match game. So the games you had way more big blinds than like here in the Bay at Matrix and Bay 101. They capped the buy-ins for at least the mid-range games. I'm not sure about 1025. I think it might be uncapped at 1025.
Yeah, I think a lot of those games that I've seen now with Mike Postle, they're like 510. I mean, they're quite some. They're like 510 in Europe a lot. I mean, they played quite deep, I would say, and quite spewy overall. People getting like heaps of big blinds with margin lines, and that is definitely not a low game. One of the things I also wanted to ask you is, that is also leading me to another topic. When you basically said, this doesn't make any sense, do you think it's a coincidence that you said that exactly when Postle owned a woman?
A woman?
Because it was Marley.
I don't think it was the fact that it was a woman that he was playing against. I think it was just it basically at that moment, I think we all watched me hit a wall, and that was when I was pretty sure he was cheating. I mean, I wasn't right. I didn't have any evidence, right? And I didn't have.
Yeah, but could it be that it was like the trigger point? I mean, it was definitely the trigger point where you said something, but could it be
the trigger? But it was the fact that she was a woman was not a part of that trigger.
Okay.
I respect her game, and I respect her come up and her vlogging abilities and stuff like that. But it wasn't. I don't ever get like pissed because someone beat a woman out of a hand. I think there's a lot of misogyny in poker.
Yeah, I didn't.
And I think I've experienced a lot of misogyny in my life, just in general, which has led me to have a bit of a chip on my shoulder. But I think that's like a common reaction when you go through like 42 years of slight, sometimes more than others, misogyny all the time.
Yeah. I mean, and blind Kamal was saying in the chat, why do you make this about women and men? I just asked, like, could it be because it's just like a bit coincidental, right? It has been quite a long time.
But
right?
It wasn't. I mean, like,
it was a ridiculous hand too. It was a ridiculous hand. It was ridiculous.
He top pair in a gut shot, and then he like checked fold's turn.
Yeah. But he did that. He did that before, right?
He did when he was losing. He only did that when he was losing. It's just like such a. It was so out of his norm to do that. And I thought in my head, the only way he's doing that is if he sees his cards. Because why does he 4-bet a turn with 8 high, but pardon me, fucking fold top pair with a gut shot on the turn, check fold. It was a check fold, right? He was out of position.
Yeah, and it was a double toned board, and there's a shit ton of semi bluffs like ace high and not flush draws that people could just click another bet with, and there's no way you should ever fold top pair there. But the fact is, that it has happened before. He basically peeled with jack high on the 9 high board, and when the other guy had a set of 9s, and on the turn he hit a jack and he folded that. I think that one was even more ridiculous for like the $50. So just the fact that it hit
all of it was ridiculous.
Yeah, of course.
And I think that was like the moment where the logic collided with the results in my head, and I was like, okay, I can't handle this. And then later on in the evening, when Berkey came in the booth and we stopped filming, and he asked me about the phones, and Justin came over and alluded to, the reason why we can't use phones is because people had complaints, so we increased security. Apparently, he said something at the table that like Live at the Bike was having, or another stream was having issues, so they removed phones from another stream, so they're doing the same thing, or whatever it was. I can't remember exactly the quote, but I was like, are you serious? This is still going on? Mike is still playing like this hero who can see the cards, and we still don't have proper security in the room, and Justin is still blinded by this. At that time, I didn't think he had anything to do with it, but I was like, he's clearly incompetent, and I need to just say something.
So I'm not going to double down on the women-men thing that it was a coincidence, but I'm going to go and take another step, and that is, was it a coincidence that it was the higher stakes game, that it was exactly happening then? Because that's the second thing. Like, first of all, I thought, maybe because Marley was playing the game and he saw this ridiculous hands against her specifically, it could have triggered something. And then the second thing that I noticed, it was a higher stakes game. So there were these two differences, and then you were saying this doesn't make any sense.
I think so. I'll just tell you with stones, the games do play higher than the blinds. Like if the game is a 5-5 because it's a stack match and there's more big blinds in play, I think the game can play like a 5-10. Especially if they have a straddle on, and you can straddle at stones up to half your stack. Most places you have a straddle that's double the big blind, But at stones, like if it's a 5-5, you could straddle 25, you can straddle 50. I don't think the size of the game came into play in my mind at the time. I just think it was an accumulation of all the hands I had watched him play and all the suspicions that I previously had. It was purely an analytical decision. It wasn't that I thought that I could have considered there was a device, but I had no evidence of a device or anything like that. I just was just like, the way he played wasn't making sense. His results weren't making sense. He played perfect in every hand.
Veronica, I'm not really insinuating any of this, that it wasn't analytical or anything, because it, to me, it is actually analytical and rational in one way also. For example, there's many new players to this 25-50 game. Berkey was there, Soda was there, Mali was there. So there's all these new sets of players. So maybe that really did change things now, because you also were driving with them for like a couple of hours until you got there. This whole day was different. So I don't know. I just don't believe in these coincidences these days. So I'm trying to dig a little bit deeper there and see maybe there were like different factors, and now all of a sudden you say, oh well, this doesn't make any sense. Now he does it to them as well, to the 25-50 players. Don't you think that could have contributed a little bit to it?
Honestly, I'm just telling you honestly, it was just a matter of a compilation of all his hands, and it was regardless of who was in the game or how big the game was, it was just this out of line play. And when I say out of line, I mean perfect play. I think maybe if the game was a small, like our 1-2 game at Stones is capped. That's the only game that's capped at 200. And if he was just stacking off and doing stupid stuff at 1-2, or sorry, not stacking off, because he never stacked off, but if he was just doing crazy stuff at 1-2, I guess it wouldn't be as meaningful as it is in like a 10-25-50. But honestly, just having Berkey in the game didn't change my thought process of how his hand played out. But I think, looking back, I think everything happened perfectly. I think having Berkey in the game brought some of it to light when I finally came out with the accusations, because Berkey and I had become friends. I picked him and Christian up. Then when I tweeted about it, I think he saw, and I'm just projecting right now, but I think he saw that I was trying to be objective. And I did ask him his thoughts on Mike Postle after the game, and he was like, well, he's a good, multi-way player. But I think like that was a perfect storm, Joey agreeing to listen to me and to watch some of the streams, and then Berkey kind of being involved in the tail end of it. I think it was like just good timing on my part, which was sheer luck, but it was good timing. It all worked out because it shed a lot of light to the issue.
Also, maybe I was asking these questions because it for sure would have changed things for me. Because if I believe that somebody could do, let's say, to a magnitude of like 10% of what Postle has been doing, or 1% even, I would only believe it if it was done against recreationals, because you could exploit them on a lot higher degree. But then if I had them now, professional players coming in and you would do the same thing to them, then all of a sudden, and then repeatedly, imagine these sessions would repeat with professional players in them and more of them, then that would for sure have affected my, at least, thoughts about the situation.
Well, I was also thinking like, so Marley plays in the bigger games. I've seen her play. I think I saw her play in Bobby's room, like on Instagram. I've seen her play. I think she was playing like 100, 200 in one of these games on Instagram. And I thought, like, how tight does Postle think she is? Or how bad at poker does he? Because sometimes some people are just really bad at poker, and when they're betting, they have something, and when they're not, they're check folding. And I was just thinking, what is his perception of her? He can't think that she's just betting the nuts, right? He just can't think that. She knows what she's doing. Like, there's a ton of draws. Like you said, I think there's a flush draw.
Two of them.
2 flush draws
and straight draws.
And a straight draw. And like like she could have, same kind of hand as him, like a pair and a draw of some sort. And I'm just like, it's just such a weird spot to be folding. What the only thing he could put her on is, you know, the nuts right here. And I don't know, it's just it didn't make sense to me, because I'm like, why isn't he deriving a range out of this? How, if he is deriving a range out of this, is then he's never folding here, right? It's a bad fold, I think. No?
Of course. I mean, he node locked
it. You're the pro.
he node locked. The joke is he node locked it for one combo in PO, but you know, he just, if you put in this all like that one combination, yeah, then you know, it's gonna say you have to fold.
The only real explanation is that he's God. So
yeah.
Yeah, so that hand, like the way it played out, it completely didn't make sense. And not everything that he did that night was egregious, but that hand really just
it might have also, you know, you had it like here and it just tipped over.
Yeah.
The whole thing.
Yeah. So it didn't have anything to do with Marley, but I'm really glad it was against. I'm not glad that it was against Marley, but I'm glad that it was Marley, because it's nice to have her. People wanted to see her play, and so I think more people wanted to view that video because she was in it, because she's a very well-known poker player. So.
Yeah, I think that you know, there's obviously a lot of factors that it's really hard to put into, okay, what caused now which thing, and how different realities would have played out if you change factors. I think these are just interesting. I geek out a little bit and try to, you know, switch in some variables. That's just like my poker mind, because I'm just interested in these details, and that's why I'm going about it. And then also, I actually came up with this question when I watched your podcast with Joey, because it just seemed to me, there's one thing that made me ask you this question now, and that you said something like, and you talked about Justin, you said like, you know, my little girl brain or something, you know, him like telling you that story, and it, you know, went over to that story with Marley, and it just said maybe there's a connection.
Well,
there.
I think my initial perception was misogyny from him, but I think looking back, it was just a cover-up. I think he treated everyone like that who came to him. So maybe he's not as sexist as I thought. Maybe he actually is, as he said, I'm not the devil. Maybe he is.
But then also that brings me to an interesting point that, you know, you said that you appreciated Joey just treating you as a peer, as somebody who's, you know, really into poker, and just asking this question and not just dismissing you just because you're a woman.
Right. And I think, and I've said this like so many times, it's just so important to talk to women as a peer in poker. If you want them to feel comfortable at the table, if you want them to feel comfortable talking to you about hands, just because someone hasn't studied the same amount as you doesn't mean they cognitively can't understand things when you're discussing them with them. So I think the close friends I have in poker talk to me like a peer, and it's appreciated. And I think Joey did that, and people know that, you know, you can't have all this misogyny looming in poker. It's not a good atmosphere for everyone. So I really commend Joey. Joey's been I hate a godsend, apostle send. Joey's been great. I have just a newfound respect for him, and I have so much gratitude for him.
Awesome.
And you, I really like your videos. I watched a few other videos of yours. I like the breakdown of the hands that you have. So maybe I'll learn some PLO from you.
Thank you. I mean, if there's some PLO hands out there, send them to me. I'm happy to go into them and analyze them. There's not that many PLO hands out there, unfortunately. People have played, because most of the PLO hands...
I will send you some Omaha 8 hands. How about that?
Yeah, sure. I can do that too. People have asked me, you know, because I have a little bit of high-low background from back in 2013 about like going more into 8. The interest is somewhat limited, but yeah, I mean, sure. If you have any hands that play out in some way, could certainly go into those. It was so funny because this summer in Vegas, I played against one of the best in 08. His name is Boki. He's an online regular. And I was just jokingly sitting down at a 5-5 game after I left like a higher stakes, 10-20 game. And then I sat down at 5-5. And then I saw two guys, and one guy comes over to me, and this is another regular. And he's just like, oh fuck, now what am I doing in this table? I'm playing 5-5 and there's like two who are clearly outclassing me in this game by a lot, because what they have done the last 6 years in 08, I've played it all day long. It's like, yeah, this is going to be a good game. It's like, I tried to have some fun playing 5-5 with some people, Big O, and then there's these two guys out there.
Big O, yeah. Big O's next level.
So good at 5-card high-low, like, played like...
I know Stones actually is waiting on a license for Big O, to spread Big O. That game is crazy. I think they probably would.
I love to play Big O. I get in there. It's quite an awesome game. Now, the point about also women in poker is, I think what a lot of people don't realize, that there's also various studies showing this, that when it comes to body language and all that kind of stuff, women tend to actually be better at that, I think, at least, and also, sort of an agreeableness and social dynamics. Women understand that way better. That shows also in the frequencies of like in higher, when you look at universities and some parts of them, women tend to do better and better, and men lose like a lot of % on like the schooling system at some point.
And if you look at how we evolved, right? The women evolved more being like a jack of all trades, where socializing with the children, keeping, doing the cooking and stuff like that, and men were out hunting and very fine tuning one particular skill, whereas women were honing a multitude of skills that were social and technical and all of this. I'm talking about evolution, not nowadays. It's not like, women aren't like just cooking.
It's still in us in some way, right?
Yeah, and it is still in us. And I think, socializing, women tend to have better social. I read some article about like women having better social circles, or better at forming social circles and having more of an impact socially than men do, and stuff like that. So, yeah, there's a lot to it. We've evolved socially a certain way.
And I think that a lot of people, they play against women differently too. Do you notice that at the table, like that men play against you differently?
I don't know. I should dress up as a man and see if I get treated differently than as a woman. I feel like I don't know. I think locally, people know that I did commentary for Stones. I think people I don't think people treat me any different.
Okay.
Some people know me for my game. People want to get into my game. But that's done now. But yeah, I don't think anyone's ever treated me different. There's like clear misogyny here and there, but I don't feel like it's so prevalent. And I think a lot of the woke players, a lot of the younger players, are not allowing misogyny to continue and stand up for women in the poker room.
I think, a lot of men, they probably go one way or the other. And some soft play, some probably like overfolds way too much just because they think the girl is never bluffing. It's like, okay,
perfect. So we can exploit that.
Exactly. And if you can categorize those people in those camps, at least the ones that are taking adjustments based on that, you got a great win rate just based on that fact alone.
Right. And then you get caught with a guy saying, "Oh, I'm going to pay you off, little lady." And then you're
like, oh, yeah, and that guy. You gotta go to know that guy as well. Yeah, but I think you can get away with so much against some players, like 3-betting.
Put on a blonde wig and try it out.
Yeah, maybe you can try.
Well, I have a ton of stuff to do this afternoon, and I'm turning off my phone and my computer, and I'm stopping all Mike Postle communication, not communication with him, but I need to go have a life. I haven't ran in 2 weeks. I'm going to go for a run right now.
It's a very good idea. It has been already almost 2 hours here into this. And I want to thank you a lot for coming here on the broadcast and telling us all about your views of the whole matter for the 3rd time already after being on Joey's and Doug's broadcast already. So thank you for being here.
Thank you. No, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. I'm a big fan. I'm going to start watching all of your PLO videos. I'm really interested in trying out PLO. I think it'd be a good logical step from 08.
Yeah, I think there's really, there's a couple of differences, of course, because it's like a split pot game, and just
I don't know how to let go of ace deuce though. It makes me happy to see ace deuce. I don't know if I can leave that alone when I go to PLO.
in a way, you kind of need like the at least third card, the third card and the fourth card. Like if it's a 9 or if it's rainbow and not have a king or a queen in it, it gets like rather weak, and you'd rather have some other qualities. But yeah, you kind of have to. You have to your own ranking system. I guess that helps because there's not really ranges out there, right? So you got to figure out, okay, when does the third and the fourth card matter more, especially when you're like in early position. The third and the fourth card matters so much more.
Right. Yeah.
Because otherwise the ace deuce doesn't get so playable, and also you have less prediction.
I will draw. No.
Yeah. The thing is, you have so much less predictability of whether the hand goes multi-way, and that's like a trouble for weak ace deuce when you go 3-way, 4-way. That you're actually going to get quartered. You're basically going to get the low with some other guy who has also ace deuce, and then somebody else has the high. Whereas if you're in the cutoff or on the button, most ace deuce are like extremely good because now all of a sudden you know that it's going either heads up or maybe 3-way. So your ace deuce goes a lot up in value because you're not going to get quartered as often. That's the thing.
Eliminating the quartering of the pots has greatly improved the game for me.
Yeah, for sure. That's like figuring out in 08, and there's many other things. But PLO is a way of life, Thomas says in there. That's true. It's so complicated, the game. There's so many facets to it. It's incredible. You always detect some new things.
Well, thank you so much for everything. It was really nice talking to you. And hopefully we can do this again sometime and chat like a follow-up if you ever have time.
Sure. I mean, there might be some other topics in the poker industry we could talk about.
And if I think someone's going to come forward with some information, so that'll be really
maybe we
really
have
interesting.
That. And maybe next year, debatably, I'm going to be more in the live poker circuit, and I might play somewhere in the West in the US. I'm definitely coming to Vegas again next summer, so that's already planned. But then also I might actually want to check out some PLO games on the West Coast. So maybe, maybe something is streamed at that point. I heard that you're going to run a new game.
We'll see.
All right. Thanks for being on the call. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a good night.
All right, guys. We're out for today. See you guys. And make sure to like this video. It helps out the channel a lot. Subscribe if you haven't done so. And the notification bell lets you know when the next video is out. So thanks, guys, for tuning in today, for being a part of this. And happy to do some more content like this in the future. If you like it, let me know in the comment section below as well.